So by now you know the midbrain is the first part of the brainstem which connects the entire brainstem from the cerebrum. So these are the two pictures showing the ventral and the dorsal aspects of the brainstem of the midbrain. It is the uppermost part which is approximately 2 centimeter in length and it lies in the posterior cranial fossa. It has a central cavity which is called as the aqueduct of Sylvius or the cerebral aqueduct, and two important cranial nerves, that is the cranial nerve third and fourth, that is oculomotor and trochlear. They are related to the midbrain. So in the first picture you can observe from the ventral aspect this cranial nerve, third cranial nerve, oculomotor nerve is arising, and from the dorsal view if you see you will able to appreciate the fourth nerve which is the trochlear nerve. If you look into the diameter, the trochlear nerve will be thinner as compared to the thicker oculomotor nerve. Now, what is the function of midbrain? Midbrain has two important colliculi, the superior and the inferior colliculi, and these are involved. The superior colliculus is involved in response in the coordination of movements of eyeball in response to visual stimuli. So our response to visual stimuli, the coordinated movements of eyeball in that response is done by the superior colliculus, and the response to auditory stimuli in which the body the coordinated movements of head and trunk takes place in response to the auditory stimulus. If somebody speaks or we have an auditory stimulus and the head and trunk in that particular coordination moves, that is brought about by the inferior colliculus. So these are the two important functions of the midbrain. Now the two surfaces of the midbrain are the ventral surface and the dorsal surface. So you can see the ventral surface over here, but what do you see in the ventral surface? You can see two crus cerebri or the cerebral peduncles. These are the two cerebral peduncles which are clearly appreciable from the ventral aspect. And from the dorsal aspect, you will be able to see the tectum area, which is the colliculi area. The two superior colliculi and two inferior colliculus will be visualized from the dorsal aspect. And further, you can see ventrally, this is the junction where the midbrain and the pons are there. So this is all pons. And below this midbrain, posteriorly also, you can see this pons in relation to the fourth ventricle. Now we see the two surfaces together. Now let us see this arrow mark structure. This was the cerebral peduncle or the crus cerebri. In the cut section, if we see, this is a transverse section. So this is the area of the canal, that is the cerebral aqueduct or aqueduct of Sylvius of the midbrain. And so this is the posterior area where we had seen the tectum area at the level of superior colliculus. This is a transaction. This is the section from that area. So these will be the two, this will be the area of the anterior aspect of the midbrain. So what is there anteriorly? These are the two longitudinal peduncles which are called as the cerebral peduncle or the crus cerebri. Between them you have a space. We'll come to this part. So this is between the two peduncles. This part will be the interpeduncular fossa between the two cerebral peduncles. So over here also, if you see, these are the two cerebral peduncle or the crus cerebri we call it, and between them there is a space which is called as the interpeduncular fossa. So in a crus, the crus or the cerebral peduncle in a cut section, it will appear like this. So what is crus cerebri basically? So there are two crus cerebri or the cerebral peduncle on both the sides. They are basically the white fiber bundles. They are thick white fiber bundles. And if you see, they are diverging from each other, making an angulation in between. So they are diverging white fiber bundles occupying the anterior aspect of the midbrain, and they form the lateral boundary of the interpeduncular fossa. So this is the interpeduncular fossa. Its lateral boundary is formed by these two crus cerebri. Now, these are the crus cerebri, and these arrow marked structures are the structures which are related to it. So one nerve we have already seen that related medial aspect, related medially to this crus cerebri is this important nerve, which is the oculomotor nerve, which is supplying the extraocular muscle, majority of the extraocular muscle except the lateral rectus and the superior oblique. The next nerve is the optic nerve. You can see the second cranial nerve, optic nerve, creating an optic chiasma over here. So these are the two nerves which will be related to the ventral aspect of the crus cerebri. So the crus cerebri will be traversed by this optic tract. So this optic nerve, they cross and create a tract. So they are going to traverse the crus cerebri from the above area. Also crossing above are the posterior cerebral artery and the superior cerebellar arteries. On each side, if we see in the next picture, if you see, these are the two crus cerebri or the cerebral peduncle on both the sides. So this, between the two, this is the area of interpeduncular fossa. So now let us see what is there laterally on both the sides. This is the area of the brain which is called as a parahippocampal gyrus, and the lateral sulcus which is related over here. Along with it, on each side, this is the area of nerve, important nerve, which is thinner as compared to the third cranial nerve, which is the oculomotor nerve. This is thinner nerve, which is coming from the dorsal aspect of the midbrain and then coming in relation to the lateral aspect of the crus cerebri. This is the trochlear nerve. On the medial aspect of the crus, what is related? The third cranial nerve. So remember, the crus is related medially to the thicker nerve, which is the oculomotor nerve, and related laterally to a thinner nerve, which is the trochlear nerve, which is this trochlear nerve is the only cranial nerve which comes out from the dorsal aspect of the brainstem and then comes on to the ventral aspect. So this is the only nerve. Otherwise, rest all the nerves you had seen, they were coming out from the ventral aspect of the brainstem. So this is an important landmark, the two nerves, the oculomotor and trochlear, in relation to the crus cerebri. Now, if we see this area in ventral aspect of the midbrain in an expanded view, then what we can appreciate? We can appreciate that these two crus cerebri or the cerebral peduncle, they are forming the lateral boundary of a fossa in between them. This fossa is the interpeduncular fossa. So what is there in this interpeduncular fossa? You can see certain perforated areas. You can see small perforation in this area. This is called as the perforated substance. The other thing that is situated in this interpeduncular fossa are the two mammillary bodies. So these are the two contents. One is the posterior perforated substance, which is the gray matter area, which is pierced by many central branches of posterior cerebral artery. So you will learn the arteries when you do the blood supply into the brain and the spinal cord. So these posterior cerebral arteries, central branches, they pierce the gray matter through this area. So this gray matter area where these central branches of posterior cerebral arteries are piercing. So these small holes are for the central branches of posterior cerebral artery. They create a perforated area. So that perforated area is called as a posterior perforated substance. And the two mammillary bodies can be seen in the interpeduncular fossa. And if you go above, this is the optic tract, the optic chiasma, the crossover of the two optic nerve, that can be visualized in relation above, crossing the cerebral peduncle. Now we come to the dorsal aspect. This again is the cut section through the level of the superior colliculus. So look over here. What do you see posteriorly? Posteriorly, very important eminences are seen on both the sides, superiorly and inferiorly. So there are 4 rounded eminences totally. So 2 rounded eminences in the superior part. This is called as the superior colliculus. So these eminences are arranged in pairs. So you have a pair of superior colliculus and you have a pair of inferior colliculus below. So these are the two, superior and the inferior colliculi. The superior colliculus, this is the superior colliculus, this is the center for the visual reflexes, and the inferior colliculi is the center for the auditory reflexes. So if we cut a section through the superior colliculus, this is how it will appear, the midbrain, because we know that the cerebral peduncle are diverging, creating interpeduncular fossa in between. So these are the two crus cerebri. Posteriorly, these raised elevations are the elevation of superior colliculus, and somewhere displaced more posteriorly is this cerebral aqueduct. Now, this is the cranial nerve. We were talking about the 4th cranial nerve, the trochlear nerve. Can you see this cranial nerve, very thin cranial nerve, which is emerging out from the dorsal aspect of the midbrain. So this is the only cranial nerve out of all which emerges from the dorsal aspect of the brainstem, as I've just told you. So this fourth cranial nerve is actually taking its origin from either side of the frenulum villi. This is the area of the frenulum villi. So what is that? So this area, which is the superior medullary velum connecting to the two peduncles, this is the area of the superior medullary velum over which you have the frenulum villi, which is part of the midbrain. On the lateral aspect of both the frenulum villi, these are the at the level of the inferior colliculus level. This is the trochlear nerve which arises. And there is a cruciform shaped sulcus between the superior and the inferior colliculi, which is called as a cruciform sulcus. So important right here onto the dorsal aspect is the origin point of the cranial nerve 4, that is the trochlear nerve at the level of inferior colliculus. This nerve is, nucleus is there and the nerve is arising on either side of the frenulum villi, which is located at the level of the superior medullary velum, which is right here. Now, if we see the lateral aspect of the midbrain, this is the lateral aspect of the midbrain. So we can see that through two branchium, the two colliculi are connected. So these branchium, lateral aspect, from the lateral aspect, you can appreciate this is the inferior branchium, and from the superior colliculus, the superior branchium of superior colliculus will be seen. So in this picture, you can clearly see the inferior branchium over here. So these branchium are what? These are the bundles, thick bundles of white fibers. So the colliculi were the nuclear area group, and the white matter bundle will be seen in the form of the branchium. So all the axonal fibers from the nucleus of superior colliculus and inferior colliculus, they will run along the white matter bundles, which are the branchium of colliculi. So the two branchium are seen right here. So they are the branchium of superior colliculus. By this arrowhead, you can see this branchium is connecting the superior colliculus to the lateral geniculate body, which you will learn in the thalamus. So connecting the superior colliculus to the lateral geniculate body and the optic tract, that means the visual impulses from the retina is brought from the retina to the superior colliculus by this pathway. That is a branchium of superior colliculus. So the lateral geniculate body is connected to the superior colliculus by this branchium of superior colliculi, which is conveying visual impulses from retina to the superior colliculus, because superior colliculus was involved in visual reflexes. Now this below, there is another arrow. This is denoting the inferior branchium of inferior colliculus or inferior branchium. This is connecting the inferior colliculus with the medial geniculate body. This rounded structure, this is the medial geniculate body, and this is conveying the auditory impulses. Now we come to the aqueduct of Sylvius. This aqueduct of Sylvius, as we compare it from the other parts of the brainstem and the spinal cord, we can see this is displaced more posteriorly, and it divides the midbrain into two areas. Those two areas is the area which is behind this aqueduct, smaller area, which is called as the tectum area, and this area which is in front of the aqueduct, which is larger in size. This is called as the cerebral peduncle area, or which is ventral to the aqueduct. This cerebral peduncle will be further divided into various segments. We'll come to that point. So two areas internally we can visualize, and that is from the reference of cerebral aqueduct or the aqueduct of Sylvius. Area behind, that is tectum, and area in front, which is cerebral peduncle, and the two cerebral peduncle are diverging from each other. Now, if we look into the dorsal part, which is the tectum area, which is behind this aqueduct, cerebral aqueduct, so this area tectum. So we can find certain gray matter nuclei, that is a superior colliculus. This is the superior colliculus in the upper part. So this is the gray matter nuclei, the superior colliculus upper part, which is involved for the visual reflexes, and the inferior part, which is the inferior colliculus. Also lying in this area is the pretectal nucleus on both the sides. The ventral part of the midbrain, or the cerebral peduncle, there are three portions in that. First part, this is the crus cerebri. The frontmost part or the anterior most part of the cerebral peduncle. This is the crus cerebri. Behind them, you can see certain pigmented areas. This is the substantia nigra. And then posterior to it, this is the area of tegmentum, which is actually the crus cerebri and substantia nigra. The constituent of both of them is going to be constant at both the levels, superior colliculus level of midbrain and inferior colliculus. But the portions in the tegmentum area will change from superior colliculus to inferior colliculus. One important gray matter nucleus over here at the level of superior colliculus can be visualized in this area of the cerebral peduncle, that is the red nucleus. So total, you have seen the nuclear, gray matter nuclei, you have seen the superior and the inferior colliculus area, pretectal nucleus, and this big red nucleus in the tegmentum part just posterior to the substantia nigra. I have shown you this red nucleus on both the sides. Now the crus cerebri. This crus cerebri, what is this? This is actually the dense mass of descending white fibers. And these descending white fibers are taking its origin from the cortex, cerebral cortex, but they terminate. So this crus cerebri, this is taking its origin, the white matter fibers, they are taking origin from the cerebral cortex level and terminate in the level of brain or in the level of spinal cord. So above, if you see, it will be continuous with internal capsule, and below it will be continuous with the basilar part of the pons. So one of the tract that you already know, remember, corticospinal tract. Remember, we did that it was passing through the middle area of the crus cerebri. This is the crus cerebri, which is the ventralmost area of the cerebral peduncle. So this entire crus is basically white matter fiber. One of the fiber we already know is the corticospinal corticonuclear fiber that was running from the midbrain medial part of the crus cerebri. So the fibers that are constituted by the crus cerebri is corticopontine fiber, corticospinal fiber, corticonuclear fibers. These all fibers are present at the level of the crus cerebri. So let us see what are the constituents of these fibers at the level of the crus cerebri. So in the middle part, you can see these are the corticospinal and corticonuclear fibers in such a way that the more medial fibers are representing the upper part of the body and the lower body represented in the lateral part of the crus cerebri. So this intermediate 3/5 area of the crus cerebri is occupied by the corticospinal and the corticonuclear fibers. What about the lateral area? The lateral 1/5 area is occupied by the fibers which are arising from the temporal lobe, parietal lobe, and occipital lobe of the brain, and they are reaching the pons levels of temporopontine, parietopontine, occipitopontine fibers. They will be the corticopontine fibers from temporal, occipital, and parietal lobe, named as temporopontine, occipitopontine, and parietopontine fibers. They will be occupied in the lateral 1/5 area of the crus cerebri. What about the medial 1/5? The medial 1/5 will be the corticopontine fibers which are arising from the frontal lobe of the cerebrum. So that means the frontopontine fibers. So the frontopontine fibers from the frontal lobe will be present in the medial 1/5 of the crus cerebri. Now, corticopontine fibers are actually the fibers which are arising from the cerebral cortex area. They reach the level of pons, pontine nuclei, and from the pons, because below the midbrain you have the pons. So suppose this, I'm talking about frontopontine. So they are arising from the cerebral cortex. They reach the medial 1/5 area of the midbrain, and then from here, it reaches the pons nuclei. Pontine nuclei. So they terminate in the pontine nuclei, and from the pontine nuclei they ultimately go to the cerebellum of the opposite side through middle cerebellar peduncle. It's a part of the extrapyramidal system. So corticospinal fibers, this we have already done in detail. The corticospinal tract, corticonuclear tract, they are arising from the majority fibers from the precentral gyrus, and they are the motor fibers involved in the movement, voluntary movement of the body. Now, behind the crus, the next part in the cerebral peduncle, behind the crus, this is the substantia nigra. In the cut section also, you can see this is a pigmented area of the substantia nigra that you have to draw. This substantia nigra, the pigmented area which is separating the crus cerebri and the tegmentum part of the cerebral peduncle. So this substantia nigra is a band of gray matter. This is a band of gray matter which is dorsal to the crus cerebri but ventral to the tegmentum area. Why it is pigmented darker? Because of the presence of pigmented nerve cells containing melanin and iron pigments. They are having two components. The substantia nigra has a compact part and a reticular part. And the important connections of the substantia nigra is to the corpus striatum, which is caudate nucleus, and putamen. This you will do later at the end of the neuroanatomy lectures, corpus striatum. So they are connected to this corpus striatum. They are connected also to the red nucleus and to the reticular formation. So this is an important gray matter, a darkly pigmented area, which is connected to the corpus striatum mainly. Now the compact part of the substantia nigra, that is close to the tegmentum, that is, it is a more posterior part, and it is richly dominated by the neurons containing dopamine and substance P. The reticular part of the substantia nigra is closer to the crus. That means they occupy the more ventral part of the substantia nigra. They have lesser number of neurons having reticulated appearance. And the neurotransmitters GABA, serotonin, enkephalin, substance P, they are released by these neurons. So now we come to the tegmentum part, which lies between the substantia nigra and the tectum. Actually, this arrow is quite expanded. This should not come till this one. Tegmentum part will be in front of the tectum. So in this picture, this part. So this part is the area of the tegmentum, which is between the substantia nigra. Between the substantia nigra and the tectum, this part is the area of the tegmentum, which is consists of gray and white matter. So this will be occupied by gray and white matter, and it's an upward continuation of the tegmentum of pons. Now, midbrain of transverse section, this is important for you to draw also. So only two sections will be doing at the level of the midbrain. The one section which passes through the superior colliculus, arrow mark, this is a superior section through the superior colliculus. This is how you will draw it, and you will draw the superior colliculus behind. You can see this superior colliculus will be drawn behind. In front, the cerebral peduncle and substantia nigra. This I have told you, substantia nigra and the crus cerebri. These two portions of the cerebral peduncle is going to appear similar either at the level of superior colliculus or at the level of inferior colliculus. So substantia nigra and crus is going to be similar. What is going to be different is the tectum part. That is, at superior colliculus, you are going to draw the superior colliculus and the tegmentum containing different sets of nuclei, and the arrangement will differ. The white matter fiber arrangement will differ. The next section at the level of inferior colliculus, in which posteriorly you are going to draw the inferior colliculi, and then you can see the arrangement of gray matter and the white matter fiber will differ. So at the level of the superior colliculus, this big gray matter nucleus, red nucleus will be appreciable, whereas the red nucleus will not be seen at the level of the inferior colliculus. And also there will be different arrangement of white fiber bundle. So we'll see these two pictures now in detail. So first we'll begin with the lower section of the midbrain, which is at the level of the lower part of the midbrain at the level of the inferior colliculus. So if we are drawing it inferior colliculus, then we should draw the two inferior colliculi behind, and the crus cerebri and the substantia nigra, remember I told you, will look similar at both the levels. So the gray matter area in this inferior colliculus level will be around the aqueduct, which is more posteriorly placed, this canal. You will draw the periaqueductal gray matter, which is synonymous with the central gray matter, right? And then you will draw the trochlear nerve nuclei. This is the trochlear nerve nuclei, the fourth cranial nerve nuclei at this particular level, at the lower level. At higher level, you will find the nuclei of the oculomotor nerve. Then you will find the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve and nucleus of reticular formation that will be seen at the level of midbrain at inferior colliculus. So this arrow marked area is the area of the periaqueductal gray surrounding the aqueduct. The second thing after periaqueductal gray that you have to draw is the trochlear nerve, the motor nucleus of the trochlear nerve. In the previous picture, the trochlear nerve nuclei, the fiber was not shown arising from it. So in the same picture, you get, because of the arrangement of the fiber, I've shown you this particular cut section. So if you see the position of the trochlear nerve nucleus, this is in ventral to the periaqueductal gray matter and it's midline, and posterior to the medial longitudinal bundle. So if you look carefully over here, this trochlear nerve motor nucleus, you can see the nerve fiber of the trochlear nerve, how it is decussating at the level of superior medullary velum. So you can see how from the nucleus is lying, the trochlear nerve nucleus is lying in front of the periaqueductal gray, and then from the midline it is crossing, it is going dorsally and laterally, and then reaching out, coming out from the level of inferior colliculus, decussating at this particular level, and then on going to the opposite side. So this is how it crosses. The fiber goes laterally and then dorsally it goes and winds around the central gray. Central gray ke around it winds, and it is also lateral to the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal. So not only it is winding around laterally, lateral to the gray, central gray, but also lateral to the mesencephalic nucleus, and then it is decussating and crossing. That means crossing at the superior medullary velum and then goes lateral, and from here if you trace it further, it will come out, the fiber will come out and will be lateral to the crus cerebra. So this is the crus cerebra. So somewhere here will be the fiber which is coming out and was shown in relation to the lateral part of the crus cerebra. So this is a course of the trochlear nerve traced from its nucleus, trochlear nerve nucleus. Now lateral to this is the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, which is in the lateral part of the central gray matter. Below this mesencephalic nucleus, because the trigeminal nerve nucleus at the level of the midbrain, we call it mesencephalic nucleus, and below it will be continuous with the sensory nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. So it's in at this particular, this trigeminal nerve mesencephalic nucleus will contain unipolar neuron, which is going to receive, this mesencephalic part is going to receive the proprioception from the muscles of mastication, facial muscles, ocular muscles, and teeth. So these proprioception is received by the mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve. Now we will see the arrangement of white matter at the level of inferior colliculus in case of midbrain. So the first white matter is from ventral aspect. If we see, this is the decussation, superior cerebellar peduncle. Remember, superior cerebellar peduncle carrying the spinocerebellar tract, they are crossing through the level of midbrain. So this superior cerebellar peduncle decussation will be seen over here. Then you are going to see the lemniscal system right from here, from the medial lemniscus to the trigeminal to the spinal and the lateral lemniscus. Remember, MTSL. Medial lemniscus, trigeminal, spinal, and lateral lemniscus, that will be seen surrounding. So these decussation of fibers will be seen majorly, and rest other fibers will also be seen. We'll come to that one by one. So first, coming to the decussation of superior cerebellar peduncle in the front. So remember, in medulla we did two decussations, sensory decussation and motor decussation. Sensory decussation was for the posterior column and the motor decussation was for the pyramidal tracts, corticospinal tract. And at the level of midbrain, we will see the superior cerebellar peduncle decussation, and this is midline and ventral to the central gray. The origin is from the dentate nucleus of the cerebellum, and it will form the ascending tracts of red nucleus and to the thalamus, and descending tract of reticular formation, inferior and accessory olivary nucleus. Now coming to the lemniscal system, which is seen dorsomedial to the substantia nigra. From medial to lateral direction, if we see, this is a medial lemniscus. This is a trigeminal lemniscus, followed by spinal lemniscus, and then the lateral lemniscus in this order. The lateral lemniscus, remember, it was for the auditory impulses. The lateral lemniscus is going to terminate in the inferior colliculus and medial geniculate body. So this lateral lemniscus will be seen till the level of the inferior colliculus. When we draw the section of the superior colliculus, only the initial 3 lemnisci will be seen. The lateral lemniscus will be absent at the level of superior colliculus. But at inferior colliculus, you are going to draw all the 4 MTSL, the lemniscal band. Now the other white matter fiber bundles that are left are the rubrospinal tract. This is the rubrospinal tract. This you have to form at both in the paramedian direction. Then the tectospinal tract. This is a tectospinal tract, and the medial longitudinal bundle on both the sides in this order. Medial longitudinal bundle, tectospinal, and the rubrospinal tract. The other white matter fiber bundles apart from cerebellar peduncle decussation and lemniscal system. Now we come to the tectum part. The tectum part is at the level of inferior colliculus. We are going to see the inferior colliculus. This is a relay station for auditory pathway, as I have told. So involved in the auditory and audio-visual reflexes, the inferior colliculus. Superior colliculus was for the visual pathway. So now let us see the connections of the inferior colliculus. So in this particular, this is a spinal cord, cervical spinal cord section, and this is a level of superior colliculus and inferior colliculus. And this inferior colliculus through the inferior branchium is connected to the medial geniculate body. This is a medial geniculate body through which the auditory impulses are going to the, or this is the auditory cortex. So this radiation is the auditory radiation. So the inferior colliculus is going to receive afferents from the lateral lemniscus. This is the pathway of lateral lemniscus. Remember, lateral lemniscus we have just seen at all the sections. We saw the lateral lemniscus. So the lateral lemniscus is sending afferents to the inferior colliculus, and the efferents of the inferior colliculus are going to go to the medial geniculate body via the inferior branchium, which further finally projects to the auditory cortex through the auditory radiation involved in the auditory impulses. Some fibers also go to the efferent fibers also reach the superior colliculus, and these superior colliculus of the same side creates the tectobulbar tract, which is for the extraocular muscles, and some fibers go to the spinal cord level for the tectospinal pathway. So these are the efferent channels, the afferent, lateral lemniscus carrying the auditory impulses projected to the auditory cortex via the medial geniculate body, and some to the superior colliculus for the tectobulbar and tectospinal tract. So this in a summary, if we want to see the inferior colliculus section, we'll find the inferior colliculus behind, that swelling of inferior colliculus. The aqueduct, this is the periaqueductal gray that is seen. This is the actual picture histologically stained. And the medial longitudinal fasciculus, the superior cerebellar decussation area, and the crus cerebri. This is the crus cerebri containing the fibers that we had just seen. The spinal lemniscus, the lateral lemniscal fibers, the medial lemniscal fibers seen in a cut section. And the origin of the cranial nerve nucleus, fourth cranial nerve nucleus that can be seen in the arrow marked area. Now we come to the superior colliculus, the transverse section of midbrain at the level of superior colliculus. So the gray matter area that will be seen in the transverse section of superior colliculus is this red nucleus that I've told you. Only the tegmentum part changes at both the levels. Rest everything will be similar in the crus cerebri and substantia nigra. So in the tegmentum part, what do you see? You see the red nucleus right here. Another gray matter nucleus that is seen is the oculomotor nucleus and the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Also seen the same thing, that is the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, fifth nerve. Now coming to the oculomotor nerve. Oculomotor nerve, this is a somatic motor nucleus which is ventral to the periaqueductal gray matter, and both sides fuse to form a single complex. The Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which should be drawn somewhere here near the oculomotor nucleus, this is a visceral motor nucleus. Visceral motor nucleus, and this is dorsal to the oculomotor nucleus complex. The preganglionic parasympathetic fibers travel to the oculomotor nerve to relay in the ciliary ganglion. So when we did the ciliary ganglion, remember the role of Edinger-Westphal nucleus. So the preganglionic parasympathetic fibers with the oculomotor nerve, they relay into the ciliary ganglion, and from there the postganglionic fibers will be supplying the ciliary muscles, constrictor pupillae, muscle of the iris. So this is the role of the Edinger-Westphal nucleus for the constriction of pupil, involved in the constriction of pupil, which is called as the light reflex. Light reflex, which is the constriction of pupil in response to light done by the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Now coming to the mesencephalic nucleus. Mesencephalic nucleus we have already described, that was the carrying the proprioceptive sensation from the area of the face. Now the red nucleus, which is an oval nucleus, and it is just posterior to the substantia nigra. Iron, this is also pigmented because of the iron containing pigment inside it. The afferents which goes into the red nucleus are from the cerebellum, through the superior cerebellar peduncle, through cerebrum, through basal ganglia, through superior colliculus, through hypothalamus, substantia nigra, and spinal cord also. So all these afferents are received by the red nucleus, which is seen at the level of superior colliculus. The lemniscal system, which is seen over here, what peculiarity you can see is in the lemniscal you will not find the lateral lemniscus. Rest all medial lemniscus, trigeminal lemniscus, and the spinal lemniscal will be seen. Right, from so these are the other things, which is the medial longitudinal bundle, which we had also already seen the medial longitudinal bundle. And remember, in the tract, in the section, transverse section through the inferior colliculus, we found the rubrospinal and the tectospinal tract. Instead of that, over here we'll find the dorsal tegmental decussation and the ventral tegmental decussation. So two more decussations at the level of inferior colliculus. We had seen ventrally, we had seen the decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle, but at the level of superior colliculus we'll see dorsal tegmental decussation, which is basically the decussation of the tectospinal tract. Tectospinal tract of both the sides cross at this particular level. So the tectospinal is actually coming from the tectum level and then crossing at this particular level, which is called as the dorsal tegmental decussation. More ventral decussation is for the rubrospinal tract. So from the red nucleus, the fibers goes to the spinal cord and they decussate ventrally. So this is the ventral tegmental decussation that we'll find. So the lemniscus, as I've told you, will be appreciable, the medial, trigeminal, and the spinal lemniscus, but the lateral lemniscus will not be seen over this level of superior colliculus. Why? Because the lateral lemniscus terminates in the inferior colliculus and not present at the superior colliculus level, because it has connected to the efferent has gone to the inferior colliculus. So superior colliculus may no more lateral lemniscus will be seen. Medial longitudinal bundle, which is in front of the oculomotor nerve in the paramedian direction, followed by the dorsal tegmental and the ventral tegmental decussation. The dorsal tegmental decussation, which is in front of the medial longitudinal bundle, arises from the superior colliculus. From superior colliculus, the fibers will arise and they will decussate. So इस side का fiber will go in this direction. इस side का the tectospinal, tectum means colliculus. So from superior colliculus, tecto, they will cross in the center, creating decussation points, dorsal tegmental decussation. And ultimately, they are going to descend down to the spinal cord and terminate into the motor neurons of the ventral gray horn, tectospinal tract. Tectobulbar tract, they also arise from the superior colliculi, cross to the opposite side, again at the level of the dorsal tegmental decussation, but instead of termination into the ventral gray motor nuclei, they terminate at the motor cranial nerve nuclei. Which cranial nerve nuclei? Third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerve nuclei, fifth cranial nerve nuclei. They terminate the tectobulbar tract. So their function is for the reflex movements of eye in response to the visual stimuli. So reflex movements of eye in response to visual stimuli is brought about by this tectobulbar tract. The ventral tegmental decussation, which is the fibers arising from the red nucleus. Remember like this, that red nucleus is ventrally placed. So the rubrospinal tract is going to decussate ventrally, creating ventral tegmental decussation. Tectum or the superior colliculus is posteriorly placed. So the decussating fibers of them, that is the tectospinal tract, is going to decussate dorsally, creating dorsal tegmental decussation. Right, so from the red nucleus of this side, the fibers are going to cross. From the red nucleus of the opposite side, the fibers are going to cross in the midline, creating the ventral tegmental decussation, and they are going to terminate into the motor neurons of the ventral gray horn of spinal cord. Superior colliculus. Superior colliculus is the gray matter nuclei with 7 alternating layers of white and gray matter. These are the name of the layers that it has, the superior colliculus. The afferents, important afferents for the superior colliculus are because it's in response to the visual pathway. So the afferents will come from the retina, from cerebral cortex, substantia nigra, spinal cord, inferior colliculus also, and the efferent will go into the spinal gray matter, brainstem, extrapyramidal, and opposite side of the superior colliculus as well. The transverse section at superior colliculus will also show a nucleus, which is the pretectal nucleus. Pre means before the tectum, so it lies at the junction of midbrain and diencephalon in the area of the tectum, just in front of it. So there are 4 pairs of small nuclei, the pretectal nuclei, and it is lateral to the superior colliculus. They afferents come from the retina and visual cortex, and efferent goes to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Function is in the constriction of pupil in both eyes in response to light, that is a pupillary light reflex. Now this is important bundle, the medial longitudinal bundle or the fasciculus. This is also called as a medial vestibular tract, and this is midline in its position. The origin is from the right and the left medial vestibular nuclei. The tract goes upwards and downwards. The ascending component goes to the interstitial nucleus of Cajal, and the descending components extends below to the cervical segments of the spinal cord through medial part of the ventral funiculus. So the tract is going upwards and downwards. The ascending part is going to the interstitial nucleus of Cajal into the eye, and the descending goes into the cervical spinal segment. So what its role should be? So the fibers that are constituting this. So the fibers, afferent fibers, just now told you, from the vestibular nucleus, right? So the fibers from this is the vestibular nucleus. So the fibers from the vestibular nucleus, this is all paramedian, medial longitudinal fasciculus. This is all paramedian. So receiving fibers from the vestibular nucleus of the same and the opposite side also. The fibers also come from the interstitial nucleus of Cajal on both the sides. They also is composed of fibers of the internuclear neurons of the cranial nerve 3rd, 4th, 6th, and sometimes 11 in some books have mentioned, but till the level of 6th they are received, and the fibers arising from the nucleus of the lateral lemniscus. So lateral lemniscus. So all these fibers are constituting the medial longitudinal bundle, which is paramedian in position throughout. This is how you can see. So as some fibers are ascending upwards and some fibers descending downwards, and finally this medial longitudinal bundle, they are involved in the movement of head required for maintaining equilibrium because of the cervical, because the descending fibers to the cervical segment. These are the descending fibers to the cervical segments. This will bring about the movement of the head, which is required for maintaining equilibrium. Coordination between the movements of eye, that is through cranial nerve 3rd, 4th, and 6th. So coordination of movement of head and the eye, this is brought about by the medial longitudinal bundle. And because of the connection with the cervical motor neurons, this is a connection with the cervical motor neuron, the movement of head is brought about in fixation of gaze and equilibrium. So fixation of gaze and equilibrium, the movement of head in response to that, this is the function of the medial longitudinal bundle. So superior colliculus level, if we revise, so this is the stained section where we can see the tectum area, the superior colliculus, the periaqueductal gray matter can be visualized over here with the aqueduct over here, and the rest of the tracts can be seen, the medial spinal lemniscus, but lateral lemniscus will not be there. The fibers of third cranial nerve nuclei coming out, that can be seen. The crus and substantia nigra will be similar looking, but the only difference between the superior colliculus and inferior colliculus, the major difference is this presence of this big oval red nucleus. So coming to the lesions of the midbrain, the vascular lesions, these are the two important vascular lesions, Weber's syndrome and the Benedict's syndrome. The Weber syndrome is because of the occlusion of branches of posterior cerebral artery, which supplies the crus cerebri and upper part of the upper midbrain. So the tracts, corticospinal tract, descending tracts, they are all involved majorly, along with the third cranial nerve and Edinger-Westphal nucleus. So they will lead to the hemiparesis of the opposite side of the body because of the corticospinal tract involvement. Paralysis of extraocular muscles will take place except lateral rectus and superior oblique because of oculomotor nerve lesion. So this oculomotor nerve is also injured. So it will lead to lateral squint and drooping of eyelid because of the levator palpebrae superioris injury, followed by dilation of pupil. The rest, there are many other syndromes which are involved at the level of the midbrain. So we'll do the other, which is the important Benedict syndrome. The Benedict syndrome, in the Benedict syndrome, what happens is this is the red area of the red nucleus, this red nucleus and the fibers from the contralateral side of the cerebellum, they are involved. So basically the third nerve, the red nucleus, corticospinal tract, they are all injured. So the hemiparesis of opposite side of the body and extraocular muscle, these two features will be similar along with the cerebellar tremors. So paralysis except lateral squint and drooping of eyelids still present along with the cerebellar tremors, this will be present, and the red nucleus will be affected. Efferents from contralateral side of the cerebellum will be affected. So this is the other syndrome in relation to the midbrain, the midbrain lesion. So thank you. So we have completed today, by today we have completed all the three major areas of the brainstem, that is the medulla. We started with medulla, then pons, and today we finished the midbrain, and the tracts have been finished. So you have to correlate each tract now with the cut sections also. So now we have done the lemniscal bands in detail at each particular level. So trace one particular tract at each sections of brainstem and trace it in that particular manner. Right. So thank you.